into positions of hopelessness and helplessness. The government gives them the drugs, builds bigger prisons, passes a three-strike law, and then wants us to sing God Bless America. No, no, no. Not God Bless America. God damn America. That's in the Bible for killing innocent people. God damn America for treating us citizens as less than human. God damn America as long as she tries to act like she is God and she is supreme.
Hello, welcome to Pod Damn America. I'm Jake. Murray's in my lap. Anders J. Lee is here.
Anders J. Lee here.
Welcome to the show. Hi, guys. We got a great episode about labor today. We're going to get back to our roots, back to basics here. We're going to talk about organizing your freaking workplace. But first, very important news coming out of the Dogefication of America. I don't know if you saw this, Anders. This Doge stuff is happening. They're waging war against government DEI. And why don't you tell us what happened, Anders?
Yeah, I just saw this article before we started recording in Huffington Post. They are de-wokifying the military. They're taking certain terms out of the archives, the military archives. There's just kind of whitewashing, I guess, the information the military has. And there is a particular term that they have flagged for removal in all kinds of files throughout the Pentagon database, and that is the word gay. They just don't want things to be gay in the military. So I guess that includes no gays in the military. Therefore, we're going back to don't ask, don't tell, or they can't go back to banning gays from explicitly serving. But one of the things is photos and references to a very big part of American modern history, 20th century. The new American century really began with a big old gay that dropped a bomb on Japan, and that is the Enola Gay. That's what it's called. That was the Hiroshima bomb was dropped by a B-29 called the Enola Gay. It was named after a woman. That's often what they would name aircraft after in the Second World War. And now it has been erased from the history of America, at least officially, according to our Defense Department. In a way, this is more woke because we're redacting and we're trying to get over or dismiss, move past, ignore, underplay the fact that we dropped a nuke, which should really be, we should reconcile with it, but that's not something to be proud of. So in a way, maybe that was what some of them were going there for, that maybe there's still a woke bureaucrat left who's like, I will erase this because I don't want to celebrate the atomic bomb.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about it from that angle. I was thinking more that like the Trump administration would like to brag about dropping nukes, so it would be weird for them to nuke this. I didn't even mean to do that. But yes, so this is very funny, right? They clearly used like a auto search thing for the word gay and deleted the Enola Gay from some record. This is important to me for a very specific reason. This is personal now that they've done this, because I don't know if you've ever heard the song, Anders, but there's a song about the Enola Gay that is a fucking goth banger.
Really?
Enola Gay by Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, aka OMD. They wrote one of my favorite songs of all time about the Enola Gay. It's like a kind of mournful, sweet, like new wavy sort of dancey, like indie dark wavy song about the plane that dropped the atomic bomb. It goes like this: Enola Gay, you should have stayed at home yesterday. Oh, words can't describe the feeling and the way you lied. Listen to it right now. I might put it in the episode, but that'll get us kicked off of YouTube. But god damn, I love the song Enola Gay, and this reminded me of it. And if they take it off of the internet because it has the word gay in it, then I'm really gonna be mad. Then I'm really finally gonna come out against these Trump people. And I've been thinking about it for a long time, let me tell you.
Damn.
They're attacking goths now via the music. I don't care if he says he's dark MAGA. It's not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this one I feel like they will put back in there because, yeah, they do want to celebrate that fact because they want to warn that we're not afraid to do it again. But they would choose a different name this time. I take it that'll have a different meaning in 70 years from now, probably. I wonder what would be the name of the aircraft that drops the next nuke?
The airplane is going to be called the Enola Homosexual just to update it or something. Well, actually, that would kind of be outdated. The Enola Straight, I guess, is what they would have to call it. The Enola Gay, by the way, like you said, it's named after like the pilot's wife or something. One of
Something
the people's
like that,
wife. Because women used to just be named gay. Words just change like this. It's insane that they would. It's insane what they're doing by going in and trying to like cut these words out of stuff because like. We'll just come up with new words for stuff like this, and then you'll have to do it all over again.
Gay used to be a first name, actually. People, I think we should bring that back. Frankly, if you're gonna de-wokeify the military, this is what should you name your kids? Things like gay, to subvert the Trump agenda. I think that should come back as a name. Also, Dick used to be a name that was quite common. I think this is probably what liberals are going to end up doing because they had the safety pin stuff last time that didn't really go anywhere. Naming your kids, I always thought, and I hear the theory there's at least 100 of them, little white kids in different liberal enclaves throughout the country who are named Barack, who were like born in 2008. I guess they'd be they're like 60 by now. But
we all saw the meme.
Yeah, this should be a trend. I think name your kids gay. That's a way to resist. But speaking of kids show Sesame Street. You hear about this? They announced a union drive.
Keep up with Sesame Street. I hear all the news about it.
I honestly didn't know it was still happening. I remember it got moved to HBO, which is now called Max. This is a.
It also got purged in the anti-gay, anti-DEI thing. Trump was like, Elon, I heard this fellow. He's Bert and Ernie. They live together in a house. Actually, this doesn't make any sense because Trump likes gay, or he ostensibly likes gay people. He pretends to like them and then lets things happen to them.
He likes gay people. He has his Treasury Secretary is gay. I think there's a chance we're going to get full-on outwardly gay Lindsey Graham. I think that could happen because I don't know if people know this. It's widely rumored that Lindsey Graham is gay. Little known fact, not a fact yet, but it's just been an open secret in Washington for a long time. And it is, he is a hypocrite. Obviously, he's been supported anti-gay legislation, but they've kind of backed off that stuff. They're focused on the T in LGBT. And there's some stirrings. I like one tweet on social media about people who have been sex workers for Lindsey Graham. And that's another hypocritical thing. He's pursued, I assume he was like voting for Sesta Fosta and stuff like that. So there maybe are going to be sex workers coming forward with evidence saying, I was with Lindsey Graham, which backs him into a corner. And this is a classic politician move. Instead of admitting to the sex work thing, he'll pivot to, I'm gay. And that you're going to have to, he'll become the token like MAGA gay guy.
Yeah, totally. That's what they'll make him do if that happens. It's like, okay, now you have to shield us from being attacked on the grounds of being homophobic, and so he'll just have to live out his last days as like super queer out but super conservative version of himself.
Yeah. Anytime there's like an anti-trans executive order, they're just going to have Lindsey Graham standing there.
Lindsey likes it. He likes it. Right? You're being unreasonable.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's DEI against Sesame Street. They don't like Big Bird. They say he's trans, or they say is Big Bird a girl or a boy? I'm not
non-binary.
Sure. Birds are not supposed to be that big. They don't. Why is he biggest? Yeah, he's a non-binary, huge bird.
They.
They are not supposed to be that big. They. I feel like Elon would like the count because he's goth and autistic at the same time.
That's going to be the entire show. Sesame Street. It will just be the counting, which is
fire
all he wanted to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. He just wanted to count from 1 to whatever, and he has little creatures interrupting him. And now this will just be and Elon. I don't think he really likes math, so he's going to pretend, just like he pretends to like Diablo. He'll pretend to like this show where it's just a guy counting and be like, "Oh yes, math, excellent," but he's not actually watching or enjoying it.
Also, everyone hates. They hate Oscar the Grouch because he's homeless. They're like, there's kids out here. Come on, he's living in a trash can.
You see today, Gavin Newsom announced he will be deposing Oscar the Grouch and executing him, throwing Oscar the Grouch under the bus. Yeah, Bert and Ernie. Grover is, I think this is an arm of Grover, is in the new logo for the Sesame Street Union, because, as we mentioned, they were privatized. This is such a striking example of, I guess, the neoliberal era, because it happened a few years ago before whatever the hell we're in now. But Sesame Street was privatized. It was a public good, and then became put on HBO. But they do have the members who are in the OPEIU Local 153. And their logo I saw today is the two arms, the two muscular arms clasping one another, but one of the arms is a Grover arm.
It's like a hard style, like when you get drunk with your friends and then you take a group photo and then 2 people have to stand at the bottom or kneel at the bottom and do the arms clasping thing. It's called a hard style. It's literally a hard style between Grover and then a sort of ambiguous brown other person, a dog maybe. I don't know who this is supposed to be. Maybe a person. I don't know. But it's pretty cool. I mean, it's not cool that all of the things that led to this happened.
Yeah.
But, they attacked the public good known as Sesame Street with a Javier Milei chainsaw and turned it into a private thing. But now there's a union, and you know what? Unions are good.
Yes. But unfortunately, they are downsizing Sesame Street. They're going to be laying people off, but that does happen in the labor movement. It's you punch somebody, they punch back. It's a continual ebb and flow, but in the end, one side will win, and that side, fingers crossed, will be organized labor, which we are going to be discussing today on the show.
All right. Our guest today is author of a new book, We Are the Union, which has a subtitle that I'm trying to find right now. Boom, 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 boom. Here it is. We Are the Union, How Worker-to-Worker Organizing is Revitalizing Labor and Winning Big. Let's talk to author of this book, Eric Blanc. Okay, we are now joined by Eric Blanc, professor of labor studies at Rutgers University and author of the new book, We Are the Union, which is about unions, I take it, and we and being them. Hi, Eric. Welcome to the show.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Good. Thanks for coming on.
Good. Great to have you. We Are the Union is the name of a queer ska band I toured with a few years ago for Real Heads. You remember that? But it's a good phrase. That's why there are bands and books named after it. Hi, welcome to the show. How are you? So let me ask you a little bit about your book. Why did you write this book? What's going on in the labor world specifically?
Sure. I mean, I think the reason people should care about the book is not so much because of the book, but because of all of the insane stuff that's going on in the world. So if you look at Trumpism or climate catastrophe, or just the fact that billionaires control so much of everything, it poses the question of like, well, what do you do about that? And I think the answer is, or central part of the answer is, rebuilding a powerful labor movement. The book starts off with this graph, which is the most important graph to understand everything that's happening in the world in this country, which is the relationship between union density and income inequality. So basically, union density, the percentage of workers in the union, goes up, income inequality goes down, and vice versa. And so if you want to understand why this country is at such an impasse, and frankly, why most of the capitalist world is at such impasse? Well, a large part of it has to do with the power imbalance between workers and bosses. And historically, and still today, the main way through which you rectify that power imbalance is through workers building power at work and the union movement. So the union movement has to grow by tens of millions to essentially beat back the power of the billionaires and all of the catastrophes they're bringing. So the book is an attempt to answer a really specific question about what would it take to actually do that in today's conditions? Because obviously, maybe it sounds good, and who could object to the labor movement getting bigger and stronger? But there actually hasn't been a lot of work seriously about what are the mechanisms and processes and tensions to make that happen. And fortunately, in the recent period, we've had some examples of what sort of mass scale unionization could look like: Starbucks, Amazon, auto workers. We can talk more about that. But the book is an attempt to look at the recent labor uptick in the US to make an argument about what it would take to organize millions of workers and turn things around.
I see. Okay, that's a very good answer. It's very good assessment of where we're at. Very timely. I know we all kind of probably listening to a show like this already know that there is a labor movement and a reason for it to exist, and there's Starbucks and the yada yada yada. Everything's happening, but yeah. So I guess first thing I'll ask you, from having read a little bit of your book, is that he seems to propose that there is a new style of organizing that is paramount. What is this thing you talk about known as worker-to-worker organizing? How's it different from organizing in the past and stuff like that?
Yeah, the basic counterposition is between worker-to-worker organizing and what I call staff-intensive organizing, which has been the norm until recently, and it's still really the norm in labor unions, in which basically, at its best, you have a staffer intensely coach a new unionization drive. At its worst, it's sort of the staffer does it in place of the workers. But in all of its different iterations, the traditional model has required a huge number of staff to help workers win a union election. The norm is like one staffer for every 100 workers you're trying to unionize. It costs on average about $3,000 to organize a single worker in the private sector through this model. And the problem is essentially that it's not scalable. Even if when it's effective, it's just too costly in terms of money and time to grow. You can't organize tens of millions of workers that way. So worker-to-worker unionism takes the best parts of that model. It takes the things that staffers do well and says, okay, we still need to have that. We still need to have somebody needs to be coaching new drives. Somebody needs to be helping strategize. Somebody needs to be helping initiate efforts. But it gives workers and encourages workers, inspires workers to take on those responsibilities: strategy, initiation, and training. So that's really how I define worker-to-worker unionism.
Well, something you just touched on is a theme throughout the book, and that seems to be, it's not just bosses or political figures who labor organizers have to contend with. Often it's union bureaucracies. Why are these bureaucracies so complacent in many cases, and why are they not more excited? I'm sure many of them are, but in general, seems to be a lack of excitement for the upsurge at Starbucks, for instance. What's the reason for this?
Yeah, it's a good question. The sad reality is the recent labor uptick, as exciting as it's been, has happened mostly despite the top leadership of the labor movement, not because of it. I have some data points in the book shows that the actual number of staff in labor unions has dramatically declined, even though the amount of money that labor unions have has gone up and up. So labor unions aren't investing in new organizing. They're mostly been just sitting on their money and kind of just burying their heads in the sand, even though the context for organizing over the last few years has been just exceptionally good. This is just an exceptionally fruitful moment after the pandemic, with workers radicalized by burning, Black Lives Matter, a tight labor market, a good National Labor Relations Board under Biden. All of these things you'd expect the labor officialdom to get on board, and they didn't. So that goes to your question. Well, why is that? What explains this inertia? There's a few different things. Part of it is just the inertia of a big organization. So unions, like a lot of big organizations, have a very hard time moving and taking risks. So that's part of it. The reality is that it is hard to organize in this country. The rational kernel to their skepticism about doing new organizing is that given how horrible labor law is in this country, that it's a real risk. It is a real risk to spend a bunch of money on new organizing, because frankly, the companies routinely fire workers. They routinely break labor law. And so there's no guarantee that if you invest in new organizing that all of a sudden you're going to automatically get millions of new members. It's a risk. The reality is that if you don't take that risk, labor will continue to decline, but there's no guarantee that, going all in something and ambitious organizing is in the short term immediately going to pan out. Most union leaders are not willing to take that risk. And so they just kind of keep on keeping on with what they've been doing. And the last thing I would say is that insofar as there's a theory of change in the labor movement, it's that we'll elect the Democrats and somehow they're going to pass labor law reform and deliver better conditions for us. And there's no evidence of that being the case, because even when the Democrats are in power, they haven't passed national labor law reform. Even when they had the votes, like Obama had a supermajority, didn't push on it. And even more so, even when they make the law a little bit better, like under Biden, the law was a little bit better. But the unions were so oriented towards just like cozying up and backroom deals with the Democrats. Even when they had an opportunity to organize, they were just so used to doing backroom deals that they didn't actually take advantage of it. So like the idea that just purely political shenanigans behind the scenes is going to make a difference, there's just no evidence for that.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me, there's been sort of parallel, if not intertwined, with new unionizing, new unions is reform movements in unions like the Teamsters or the UAW. There has been a lot of disappointment, though, with Sean O'Brien, who was elected on a reform slate, had been kind of a Hoffa guy, but broke ranks, and is now sort of cozying up to Trump and the Republicans. A lot of people are disappointed with him on the left. How do you explain the trajectory of Sean O'Brien?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, in fairness, it's not wrong to feel like, okay, we need to shake up how the labor movement's relating to the Democratic Party. I think the correct intuition there is justified, that the sort of just deference to the Democratic Party and fealty is a losing strategy. The problem is that Sean O'Brien appears to be substituting a same deference now to the Republicans, who are even more anti-labor, and it's not, you can make a lot of criticisms of the Democrats that are fair, but, all of the Democrats voted, for instance, recently, almost all of the Democrats voted to keep pro-labor NLRB, right? So you can just look at how the parties voted on this. 2 Democrats didn't vote. Sinema and Manchin voted to not keep a pro-union National Labor Relations Board. Every single Republican voted. Every single Republican voted to kick out the pro-union people from the board that determines union policies in the U.S. So the idea that somehow the Republicans have made this big transition towards working people, there's not much substance. It seems like it's primarily or exclusively rhetoric, and it's frankly, it's just really disappointing that O'Brien doesn't see that, even on the own narrow goals of the Teamsters. The Teamsters, and to Sean O'Brien's credit, are trying to organize Amazon. Well, the Trump administration has Bezos at inauguration. In what world do you think that cozying up with Jeff Bezos and Trump is going to somehow make it easier? This is the worst union busting corporation in the world. There's a contradiction there. You can't both be cozying up with the people you're trying to unionize and fight and sort of paint them in being anything other than what they are. So I would expect that this strategy is not going to go very far, but who knows what O'Brien's going to do on a personal level. The MAGA seems really adept at sort of incorporating people into their world, even if there's not much substance to then, what they're providing them in practice.
This, I just read a book about this, so it's on my mind, but Nixon did this with a short-lived sort of courting of the labor movement for kind of similar reasons as MAGA, and also involving some of the same people, because people like Roger Stone have been around for a bazillion years or whatever. And it's do you know anything about that from way back? This to me, this looks like the same trick being pulled over again, and it's not going to last.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Nixon did it, but also Reagan. I mean, it's not so unprecedented. Reagan was supposedly, he was the first union member to ever get elected president. People thought he was going to be super pro-labor, and so. Ironically, the union that he ended up famously breaking the strike of, the PATCO 1981 strike, this is the decisive turning point strike that unleashes a boss's offensive. This was a union that endorsed Reagan in 1980. Yeah. So you get a sense of, when the Democrats aren't delivering, unions are sometimes suckered into trying the other side, and frankly, also sometimes just workers have backwards ideas, and they're supporting the Republicans for just backwards ideas. Period. It's not just that O'Brien has these ideas. There's a lot of racism and anti-immigrant sentiment in the basis of some of these unions, and that the leadership, reflects that to a certain extent.
Sure.
Right.
So would you argue that there's a third thing unions can do instead of cozying up to Democrats or Republicans as a party? Is that what's going on here? Is there another way?
Yeah, I mean, the principal way is like fighting and organizing and beating the bosses, like doing what unions historically have done and what they do still successfully when they're doing what they should be doing, which is organizing a bunch of workers to build power at the shop floor to overcome the billionaires. And if you do that, I think the politicians will, be forced to listen to you more. And insofar as unions orient towards politics, I do think politics is important. I'm not arguing that like you can just sort of ignore the state. That's not, I don't think, realistic. But basically, I think unions should be supporting, Bernie type people, and be running their own union leaders, run them for office. I thought Dan Osborne's campaign in Nebraska was like pretty inspirational. Run more people like that. Run independents in red states. Run people who are like clearly not beholden to the big moneyed interests. And you don't have to reinvent the wheel. But most unions are scared to even most unions didn't even endorse Bernie, the most pro-union candidate we've ever had run, as a credible presidential candidate. That most unions were so sort of like oriented to the Democratic Party leadership that they didn't even do that. So I think there's ways for unions to take a more combative approach towards the Democratic Party, even if it, even if they still want to engage in that, they could do it in a much more effective way.
Well, on the topic of Trump, something I do want to make sure to ask is NLRB, which you mentioned. That was kind of the crown jewel of Biden's administration, if you were on the left, is that at least the NLRB, National Labor Relations Board appointments were fairly good. But where is that at now? And is that something organizers have to be worried about?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a real blow. The Biden board made it easier to unionize, and the fact that you have a Trump board now makes it harder to unionize. I don't think it makes it impossible. I don't think it means labor can't keep up its momentum, but it's just harder. It's kind of unclear at the moment what the status of the board is. Some people have made exaggerated claims that the board is just like completely defunct because there's not a quorum on a national level, which is true. There isn't a quorum on the national level, but most of the decisions and sort of day-to-day functioning of the board actually happens on a regional level. So union elections are still happening and sort of filing unfair labor practices are still happening. So the labor movement can still basically use the National Labor Relations Board process for what it's worth, which is mostly at this point to kind of legitimize elections. And then once you win an election, you have to fight it to the death, essentially, to win a first contract. The board's never really been like a mechanism primarily that's capable of forcing management to the table. So it's harder. It's still there. Whether it will go completely away, I'm pretty skeptical. I think it's going to more or less continue to be in play, but just in a weakened form.
Well, something you talk a lot about in the book is the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee, which we've covered a little bit on the show. But for listeners who aren't super familiar, what is EWOC and how did it come about, and what has it accomplished so far?
Yeah, so I can tell that story a little bit from the inside because I was one of the co-founders of EWOC. It was the beginning of the pandemic. A lot of us who were or a handful of us who were labor organizers for the Bernie campaign started getting inundated with requests from workers to ask for help because I mean, imagine March 2020, like remember this moment, people are getting sent into work and they're freaking out about if they're going to die. There's no PPE, there's no sick pay. And so we started just getting inundated with these requests to help workers start organizing to fight back. EWOC was essentially born out of that moment in an ad hoc way. We had to build an organization capable of reaching all of these workers who wanted to start self-organizing because most unions weren't talking to them or providing or even getting back to their emails or calls. Ever since EWOC has blossomed into this much bigger project, which now supports any worker in any industry unionize. And so we've helped thousands and thousands of workers. The mechanism is very simple. You go to workerorganizing.org, so listeners can literally go to there. And if you're not in a union workplace, you just fill out a form. within 72 hours, an experienced organizer will call you back and start helping you map out your workplace, take the basic steps towards unionizing, which really aren't that complicated. It's a lot of just talking to your coworkers, trying to figure out who can talk to who, listening to them. These are the basic steps of unionization, and you don't have to be some sort of like labor nerd or labor expert. You can just take the initiative. It takes a little bit of guts and a little bit of time. And so EWOC is helping thousands of workers like that just start building power. And we saw just a recent example of how effective that was at Whole Foods. So that was a drive that EWOC helped support in Philadelphia. They won the first ever Whole Foods union against Amazon. And this is Jeff Bezos owns Whole Foods. And they went up, this was under Trump just earlier this year. And they won despite an intense, insane union busting campaign, despite Trump being in office, the workers won. And so it shows you like, this is the type of thing that EWOC is supporting. And I would encourage anybody out there who's not in a union to, take this moment and start building power. It can be really frightening. I think with Trump in there, I know like I've had just moments of complete despair and, just doom scrolling. It's much more productive. And frankly, it's more enjoyable to live life doing something about it together with your coworkers than just sort of freaking out. And so I think unionization is one of the best ways, if not the only way at this point, through which you can really start turning things back around.
Yeah, well, there is one way that's been propagated a lot on social media, especially last week. There was this graphic that was pretty widely circulated for a one-day boycott of big box stores, and it exempted small businesses for unclear reasons. But there's a lot of people sharing this, and people I know who were enthusiastic about it and just wanted to do something. How do we direct that energy? Or I guess, first of all, let's start with the pitch to, maybe not a one-day boycott as like a mechanism for social change. Can you explain why that is maybe not the best avenue? And then how do we redirect people into the labor movement?
How do you know I don't just love one-day boycotts? You assume too much.
Just had a sense.
You assume too much. I mean, I will say, not joking. I do think that boycotts can be useful. So, but not a one-day boycott with no clear organizational plan or power. Boycotts are useful when they're part of an actual campaign that can put pressure on a company. And that normally requires not just consumers, but the workers at the company themselves. So to give an example, at Starbucks, there was very successful boycotts on college campuses, for instance. There's like mass movements on 40 college campuses to kick Starbucks off campus, to put pressure on the company to start bargaining with the union. And so when you have a demand, it's not just like, it's not just sort of this amorphous, don't go and see what happens. Then you can measure where you're being successful. And you also have a time frame through which you can see whether the impact is happening. Similar with Starbucks, people boycotted Starbucks around Palestine and made a big impact to help play a big role in forcing the company to the table. But that's because it was linked to an actual campaign and actual organizing. So I think the sweet spot for boycotts is, boycott when it's linked to a campaign and the workers ask you to, not just when it's somebody shares something online. But I think it's, on the other hand, I think it's a good thing that people got excited about trying to do something. The moment we're in is so bleak, and so many people just feel kind of like depressed, or I've had so many people just tell me I'm going to politically hibernate for the next 4 years, like wake me up. So, when it's over, I think in that context, the fact that people want to do something is indicative of a real vacuum. The Democrats are providing zero sort of inspiration for fighting back. Like, they're doing nothing. And so in that context, you're right. Like, what is the mechanism through which we find all these people who, for the good reasons, didn't shop at, these corporations last Friday. And we need to provide them like a better way to get involved. And I think that, when we can talk more about this, the thing that I've been mostly involved in and that I think has the most potential right now to really tap that energy and to be successful is the fight around federal workers and to save federal services. Because Musk this is like crazy talk what they're talking about. They're talking about privatizing Social Security, privatizing the Postal Service, destroying Medicaid. It's like, this is not anything that even Republican base wants. They're playing with fire here. If you don't have federal workers, how are you going to get your Social Security check? Who's going to protect veterans and the healthcare? So in that context, I think there is a fight around federal workers that can tap the energy of people who are looking just for this one day boycott as something to do against Musk in particular. Well, Musk is trying to destroy the federal government and trying to sort of do a billion horrible things. Support the federal workers who are fighting back against him. And I'll give a quick pitch on that, which is people who want to get involved in this campaign. There's going to be a lot of spreading actions against layoffs and service cuts over the coming weeks. So you can go to go.save public services, and they'll get notified of local actions. So that would be my suggestion for anybody who is like trying to find a more effective thing. Support the local workers who are making your services run.
Right. The federal workers thing is really interesting. Obviously, it's terrible what Musk is doing, but this is a unique situation where normally the radical thing is to withhold your labor, but in this case, that's what the government is trying to get these people to do, is stop working. But how can they use their strategic position now? And I know it's obviously very tenuous, many people's employment situations, to oppose Trump's policies.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the way you framed it is right, which is to say that the script is a little bit flipped, that workers are trying to stay at the job now. I mean, in part, but that poses a real fight. Like, they have to fight to stay. That part of that was just workers not getting terrorized into leaving. Part of what the Tesla, Twitter modus of operation is for Musk is to this fork in the road thing, where you basically tell anybody who doesn't agree with the new program to quit, and if they stay on, be ready to work double for the same pay, and see how many people you can get to quit that way. Fortunately, most workers didn't fall for it, and it didn't hurt that they found out through the grapevine that the Twitter people never received the compensation they were promised. So people weren't taking Musk at his word. So the first thing was workers had to stay at the job, and for the most part they have. But that's the first thing. And then, more generally, they have to fight through actions that captivate the public, that capture the public's imagination, to explain what's actually going on. Because I don't think it's so obvious to most Americans, like, what federal workers do. And so that's part of the reason why Musk is sort of able to get a little bit of traction. It's pretty unpopular, but if you think that what federal government workers do is primarily they live in DC and these bureaucrats who are just like filing paperwork, well, okay, like, who cares? But in reality, 80% of federal workers live outside, all across the country. They don't live in DC. These are people that are keeping your water clean. These are people that are serving veterans. These are people that are making sure you get your Social Security check. These are people just doing all of these basic things that are almost invisible. And the way it's described to me by some federal workers is like, well, people don't think about us because we're doing a good job, which is true. A lot of these things we take for granted, that that and you only see when it falls apart. Like, so now you start to notice it when air flight starts becoming really dangerous and you have planes crashing all the time. Well, if there were better regulation and more support for air traffic controllers and all these things, you might not have that as much. And so you get an inkling of like the dystopia world in which Trump is going to take us into with these airline accidents. That is the kind of picture we need to paint to American people. This is like, literally, if Musk and Trump get their way, all of these things that you currently take for granted are on the chopping block. And nobody's able to really explain that to the population better than workers. And so they have to take actions, mass protests, civil disobedience, it'll be up to them to figure that out. But that can keep that story in the top of the headlines, so that you have to win the argument, and then you have to win the hearts and minds of Americans to understand really what's at stake, because there's a huge ideological offensive. I think that's actually part of the reason why Trump and Musk are doing this, is that it's just they need to have a new scapegoat. So the new scapegoat right now, kind of bizarrely, I didn't even see it coming. I thought they were going to go after immigrants first. Well, it turns out they're going after like government bureaucrats, which is actually kind of stupid. It's not like there's the strongest case, but ideologically it makes sense, because they want to justify privatization and have a new boogeyman. And so it's up to us to like actually make a robust case for public services and unions.
I just saw that there's supposedly the Supreme Court weakened the Clean Water Act's limitation on raw sewage discharge into our water. I've seen people talk about this a little bit and say, that's this specific thing they did applies to like the ocean and not drinking water or whatever. But yeah, it seems like there's some really spooky things coming down the pike in terms of just gutting the entire federal government.
Yeah. And it just seems like a very clear political case that Democratic leadership could make, and they're just neglecting to for all kinds of reasons. But yeah, scary situation. Something I wanted to ask too about though is on the topic of fear. I'm wondering when you were researching the book, how did you find organizers handle the prospect of boss retaliation, which can be an obstacle to getting people to join a union? You know, it sounds nice, but then even if you get it, the boss is going to fight back, and we're seeing that now here in Brooklyn with the Alamo Draft House workers. What is that type of inoculation like?
Yeah, it's a good question. The fear factor is a central one. It's clearly central in the federal workers right now. But basically, almost any union drive, the number one thing you have to go up against is workers generally understand why a union would be good. The dilemma is, can you convince enough workers to take that risk? And so the basic conversation looks a little bit like this. You have to talk with workers. You have to listen to them. It's not just sort of like preaching at people. You have to find out what their issues are. Like, what do they care about? What do they want to see changed at work? And almost everybody, there's exceptions, but most people are pretty mad and would like to see things be different and feel disrespected. That's sort of the norm in the American workforce today. And so you have to ask people, well, okay, well, what would it take to change that? What realistically do you think it would take to see those changes that you deserve? And then you pose the question, well, okay, if you can't do that individually, because people have tried and it doesn't work, you ask the boss for a raise and they don't give it to you. What if we were to do it collectively? And then they say, okay, sure, but if we try it collectively, which is what a union is, can't they fire us? The response is a fewfold. First of all, you can point to other unions and say, look at all these unions that have won. You can point in New York City, including Alamo Draft House is facing obstacles. But just today, Barnes and Noble won their first contract in New York City. And this is not a minor deal. They won the first contract ever at Barnes and Noble and nationally, and that's a big company. So you can point to workers who've won first contracts and be like, look at the improvements they got. They didn't get fired. They won. And the reason they didn't get fired and the reason they won is because they stuck together. The company can't function without all of us, right? And so, yeah, if you were to go individually and try to do this, or if a small group of us were to try to just start waving the red flag and the union, yeah, there could be retaliation. And, there could always be retaliation, but our strength is in our numbers, right? If we all do it together and we make sure we have a strong majority before we go public, it's very unlikely they're just going to pick us off one or two. That is the strength. And this is essentially the answer to people who are scared, is you have to say, yeah, but we're going to do it all together and they're not going to be able to come after all of us. And then you ask the final question. They say, it's true there's a risk involved, but what is the risk at staying at this job? What is the risk at staying in this job where you have no job protection? I mean, this is the reality, is working in a non-union workplace means you could get fired at will. Being a union member means you have actual protections, right? So what is the risk for your family because you don't have decent healthcare? What is the risk for you to continue to get paid shit wages and not being able to get by? You have to weigh the relative risks. And when you pose it that way and people see that no matter what they do, there's a risk, then oftentimes they make the collective decision.
Can I throw something interesting at you? So this just kind of made me think about something. How do I put this? We're millennial comedians. We've been somewhat successful. We've made it to New York and Los Angeles and things. And oddly enough, I know a lot of people who have worked at Pod Save America and their crooked media affiliates and things like that. And I kind of heard a story recently that I thought was interesting about the namesake of our fucking show here. And something happened there, supposedly, is that they had recently there's a crooked media union that was ratified, and they managed to do what someone who is branded like they are would do in that situation, which is when the union won, crooked media sort of told the story as if, oh, we're all very happy about this, right? But the rub is that a lot of people who work in writing and media and stuff like that are classified as independent contractors. So people who in a lot of them worked at Crooked Media lost their jobs when the union was ratified, because they cleaned house and said, okay, well, fuck you, we'll give you this deal, but then we're gonna like gut all these. So like, if you're a worker and you're an independent contractor, which increasingly people are, that's just a thing that's, you know, because of the death of the hollowed out of the fucking labor apparatus in the United States, and in capitalism in general, people get reclassified as independent contractors so that they can't, so that you don't even have the option to do something like unionize. You're one step removed from all that. How does you approach any of this? You know, because if you're going to get put on the chopping block as an independent contractor, people are looking to unionize in the same workplace as you. Does the do workers have any like way to approach this? Does the union have a way to approach this? Is this purely political? Like it can only be changed from the top down in terms of just changing the rules where you can't keep reclassifying people as independent contractors and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's definitely a real serious tactical and strategic challenge. We see this most in two places, obviously gig workers, but also in Amazon. But one of the big problems at Amazon is that so many of the workers for Amazon are technically independent contractors, or they work for like a subcontracted company. Drivers, for instance, work for these subcontracted companies, so technically don't work for Amazon. And yeah, so part of it is legal. The NLRB was in the process of passing, essentially a new policy that made it called joint employer, where the Amazon would be forced to bargain in the name of all of the subcontracted companies that it hired out. And so part of it is you get a good National Labor Relations Board that does make it easier. And so it's harder under Trump. That's part of it. Simultaneously, you have to organize the workers. You have to organize workers who are subcontracted or who are independent contractors, even if legally it says they're not. The law says all sorts of shit. The law for many years didn't allow workers to unionize, and workers still unionize. All a union is workers coming together to fight the boss and fight for better conditions. So there's no reason in practice that independent contractors can't unionize. In fact, they are, so gig workers all across the country, for instance, are organizing, and there's all sorts of gig worker activities, and they're functioning as a union, even if legally they're technically not, employees. And so the question of what a unionization drive looks like there is, well, you make demands on the bosses, you have petitions, you call for an increase of wages for all of the Uber drivers in the city. You've seen this types of action, so you can do that as some contractors too. And I think the sweet spot for unions, where possible, is to try to bring in these independent contractors. And I don't know the situation at Crooked Media, so I can't speak to it. I think that generally the best practice is, if there's workers who are there and a lot of them are deeply involved in the company, then you demand that they be incorporated into the bargaining unit. And part of what you fight for as a union is to make people not subcontract. This is a demand you can have, and it's part of the big fight of unions. That's why you need unions, is that it actually is a mechanism through which people can have stable work. And so the argument isn't like, oh, fuck the subcontract workers, but actually, no, like, bring them in-house. And that's a fight. But I think that's the only path forward I see.
Okay, interesting. That's good to know, because I work a lot of those jobs, and I often, it seems very daunting, the idea from that position of even beginning to organize.
Yeah. And we mentioned the Starbucks union. Obviously, there's been retaliation from day one. The corporate is really, really resisting just sitting down. But it's been a while since I've heard the status of Starbucks in general. How is that going now under the Trump era redux?
Well, the news is actually good. The Starbucks news is, to me, this is like one of the most inspirational stories of the labor movement. For people who don't remember, it started in like 2021, and then Starbucks just went crazy. They went scorched earth. This was like the worst union busting offensive in modern American history. They fired hundreds of worker leaders. They systematically broke the law by denying any union shop the same raises and benefits that other stores got. They literally just threw the kitchen sink. They did everything they could to try to terrorize these workers into submission, and amazingly, it didn't work. It's like it's pretty awesome if you think about it. All of these workers just like said, "Fuck you, Howard Schultz. We're not gonna like." It almost became like a spite thing. I talked to a lot of workers. I'm like, after 4 years, you're still here. They're like paying you worse than if you were at another store. Like, what is your motivation? And some of them were lefties, and they were sort of like inclined to want to fight the billionaires, and some of them were just like, at this point, it's like purely a personal vendetta against this fucker. You know what I mean? It's but they really saw it this way. It's like, because some of them really believed in Starbucks too. It's interesting. Maybe some of us jaded leftists were like, well, Starbucks, of course, it's an evil corporation. But a lot of queer workers got jobs at Starbucks because it's like a queer friendly place, and and I think the vibe at Starbucks in the past had, some people worked there 20 years, and I talked to all sorts of workers that talk about like they really felt like betrayed. It's really like, it's like finding out that your dad is like an axe murderer or something, and that's how they described it. And so they persevered. I mean, it's really amazing. They persevered. They kept on fighting. They kept on unionizing. There's been over 550 unionized Starbucks stores. That keeps on growing. And they did force the company at the table. So it's not the case like at Amazon, or Amazon's just ignoring the union. Starbucks, for the last year now, they've been bargaining, and they're very close to getting a first contract. The company's actually trying to settle right now. The union, to its credit, is not willing to settle for a bad contract. They don't just want a first contract. They want like a good first contract. And the company just last month was forced to mediation. There was a sit-in that I participated in, and a bunch of people participated in New York, Park Slope. People got arrested, and sure enough, the next day, Starbucks agrees to mediation. So that's where they're at right now. I'm optimistic that they'll get a first contract, and if they do, that's going to be the biggest labor win since the 1930s. When was the last time workers unionized one of the biggest corporations in the world? This is the 6th largest private employer in the U.S., and workers are about to beat them, even under Trump. And I think part is that they didn't relent. They didn't just sort of like hope the company would do the right thing. They didn't expect the courts to deliver it for them. They just kept their foot on the gas pedal. Like, that was literally how they kept on winning every single time. Even after the company started bargaining, they didn't just sort of like hope that the bargaining process, through like being nice, would result. And I think they understand that it's going to create constant escalating pressure. And so they've done that, and that's how they've gotten this far.
That's great. Yeah. Do you know what's potentially would be in the first contract? What kind of victories?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen the details, but there's, the word I've heard is some of the big gains would be things like just cause. This is one of the big things that just happens almost anytime you get a unionization. This certainly would be one of the big victories. Is like, you can't just get fired at will. So you have real, stability of protections. There's all sorts of policies that they've been fighting for, just to make the workplace better. And some of them they've already forced the company to do. So for instance, like past credit card tipping, that was a tip there. That was a game they already won. But also it really kind of sucks to work at Starbucks a lot these days, because you're so understaffed. So part of the contract would be ensuring that there's sufficient staffing, so you're not just getting slammed and having all of the customers mad at you because they've been waiting 30 minutes. The quality of like work life has been really deteriorated. So I think a lot of the unionization ones, in addition to just obviously better pay, have to do with this. It's just like making it a less shitty place to work again.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been a bit of a spicy debate over the past couple of years surrounding Starbucks and other areas of the new labor movement, I guess. And that is education status. There's certain leftists who are very quick to discount union drives that involve people who have college degrees. Is that something you took into consideration in your research, the difference between education levels in different sections of the labor movement? And is that an important metric when we consider who's being brought in?
Yeah, I mean, it is important to look into it. And for the book, I actually did this like pretty large scale survey, because I have an academic background. So we reached out to I had some research assistants. We reached out to every union drive that went public in 2022. So it's over 2,000 drives. And we asked each of them to fill out a survey. So we got a sense of who the workers across the board, not just at Starbucks, but sort of in all industries, who are unionizing. And what we found is about 2/3 of workers had some sort of college degree, which is disproportionately high for the population. In similar demographics, it's about 40%. So a lot of the population already has a degree, but it's significantly higher, but not exclusively. So you're still talking about very large numbers of workers who don't have a college degree, and then also, it makes a difference. A lot of Starbucks, for instance, a lot of Starbucks workers have a college degree, but this is not kids who are going to Yale. This is like Starbucks offers. I mean, Starbucks. One of the perks of Starbucks is that they offer credits to University of Phoenix, like an online class, to get your degree. And a lot of, these are a lot of like working class kids, frankly, who are like, working at Starbucks and trying to get like some sort of degree. But these are not people who are going off and becoming, the top elite, professionals. That's just not who it is. Your average Starbucks worker isn't like that. Average Starbucks worker, and a lot of these other places are like working class folks. And whether you have a college degree or not isn't the determinant of whether you're a working class person. This is like a myth that is important to push back on. It's stupid. It doesn't make sense. Whether you're a worker or not is whether you're selling your labor to a capitalist or the boss, and whether you have a college degree doesn't as such define that. And one of the things the Republicans are doing is trying to really stoke resentment between people who have college degrees and not. And so there is a there, and I do think that there's a structural basis to this, which is that workers who don't have college degrees have particularly gotten left out of the new economy. So there's a real resentment there, and blue collar workers really particularly have kind of taken it on the chin. And I think that's part of the reason why Trumpism has been able to make more inroads. But you see all sorts of places where college educated and non-college educated workers are uniting. So the good example here is the United Auto Workers. United Auto Workers at this point is a coalition of auto workers and grad students. So you have the major union of grad students who've unionized is the United Auto Workers. And part of the reason the UAW is transformed is, well, on the one hand, auto workers themselves, like Sean Fain, organized a caucus to kick out the old corrupt leadership. But they united with a bunch of like young lefty grad students, and the grad students weren't decisive. The vast majority of the workers who voted for the new reform people were auto workers. But it didn't hurt to have it didn't hurt, and it actually helped quite a bit in a very tight election to have some of these grad students. So I do see sort of the UAW as a good example of the possibility for bridging these gaps. And there's real tensions, including the UAW. It's not like sometimes the grad students can like underestimate what it's like working at a shitty job where economics is much more central than if you're maybe a grad student where maybe economics is important but it's not as central. So there's real tensions there based off people's distinct realities. But labor organizing is always about this. It's always about how do you build a broader coalition based on commonalities. It's not that everyone has the same experience, but it's that you find the sort of the thread that unites people against the bosses. And that's, I think, what you have to do with educated and non-educated college workers.
I think you just made some really excellent points. And also the thing with like the grad students and the UAW has been really fascinating to me, because I think there's on some level a way of looking at it where, we all are part of the working class, but in another way, the grad students being like educated nerds in a certain way, you might argue that to get the goods, like to really make something happen, we don't need to all be the exact same person. We actually need to combine like the intelligentsia and the rank and file and working class to like organize in a way that has happened throughout history or whatever. There's sort of a classical way of looking at that's been successful. Maybe the intelligentsia in the UAW was like it has been in the past in Marxist-Leninist revolutions or something like that. Maybe not. I don't know. I think I'd add another thing that's probably happening with like this question of why is everyone who works at Starbucks a little bit more educated, and how is that going to play out in terms of Trump's like faux populism sort of dividing and conquering by trying to make this imaginary line between us where we know we are all still in the working class is I think what's going on there is as a service industry worker, not to use the as a phrase that everyone hates, but like, I mean, this is my lived experience or whatever. But as a guy's worked in the fucking service industry a lot, there are a lot of people with college degrees there. And something I noticed after a while from really thinking about this a lot is that I think part of the reason that is that the type of work the service industry is something that always like feels temporary at first. Yeah. And our generation is like downwardly mobile in a unique way that is historically unprecedented. So a lot of people just said like, you work places and people, you're a barista and someone's like, you go, how long have you worked here? And they're like, well, I thought it was going to be 1 year, and now it's going to be 8 or whatever, because it's just a line of work that you if you didn't understand that you were downwardly mobile, you might get into, because there's some like fluidity to it. You can move to a different Starbucks if you need to. If you're traveling around, it doesn't feel permanent. Whereas, if you're a mechanic, maybe you come from a line of people who were like, your father was a mechanic and so on. It's more of like from the beginning, you're going to be doing this forever. And that's how we end up with a bunch of people who are all in the working class and in different jobs that they look a little different. The baristas are a certain type of person or whatever. But I think, to me, if this what I'm laying out is a actual reality or whatever, if any of this like actually tracks, then there's probably going to be more and more people with college degrees on the same side as us and in the fucking working class. And that is something to maybe understand if you're trying to pick this apart and message correctly with people, and really trying to battle this faux populism that is like, nerds versus jocks and stuff, and grads, they're queer theory grad students or whatever. There's gonna be more of queer theory grad students in the labor movement.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I mean, and it's just worth pointing out that actually historically the labor movement has tended in most times and places to be at its strongest amongst the like most privileged workers, which actually makes sense because the people who have enough leverage to force management to listen to you or to take those risks tend to be not the worst paid workers who are just totally replaceable, but it tends to be somebody you have some sort of skill. So in the 1930s, for instance, like the people who led most of the drives tended to be the skilled workers, and they at their best they organized the rest of the working class. But if you have a bit more of a cushion, you have a bit more leverage, and then it makes sense you might take more of those risks. Whereas like if you're working at McDonald's and you have family depending on you, you might not take those same risks. And so I think that just like we need to look at it as a question of power and not some sort of like weird moralistic thing where like you should feel bad if you got a college degree. That's just like, it's sort of just bad identity politics, but in the class form. And frankly, it's an identity politics that the right wing benefits from. It's not to our advantage to lean into that.
Absolutely. I have one more question as we're rounding out here. So you mentioned EWOC was formed kind of as an outgrowth of Bernie's 2020 campaign. So given that and other parts of the movement that really came through Bernie running for president, should we be readying ourselves for a similar type of candidacy in 2028, or has the moment for that type of politics passed?
No, I think we should. I mean, I think one of the reasons this last election was so fucked up was that we didn't have a left standard bearer, and so I think the experience shows that, first of all, the experience shows that whether we like it or not, third party candidates outside of the sort of primary process just have a very hard time getting traction. Like, honestly, I like Cornel West. If Cornel West had like run in the Democratic primary, I think he might have been like a viable candidate. Like, honestly, I was like excited. I thought he should have. And I was really bummed when he decided to go third party, because I was like, you're just not going to get traction. So I think that's part of it. We should just like not entertain that illusion. And, if you think about it, it's kind of crazy, despite the genocide in Gaza, and as bad as, the Democrats have been on that, very few people avoided third party. So that's one thing is that, like, you do need to run somebody. I don't think third party is viable. And yeah, so it means you need to run somebody in the primary on like a Bernie type program. Bernie's too old to do it. It needs to happen though. I think somebody needs to run on kind of like a labor Bernie platform. People have talked about Sean Fain from UAW running. I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't know if it needs to. Like, the reality is you just need someone who's an outsider. You need somebody who's an outsider, and you'll see what catches. There's going to be a lot of fights from here to 2028. And so I think you're going to see a lot of like new worker leaders emerge. And frankly, it's like, I don't know, you could just somebody and make them, and get the labor movement and get the left to be like, this is the, get some firebrand worker and just say, fuck it. Like, I have no experience. Trump had no experience. Elect me president. I can't do a worse job than these other, you know what I mean? Like, I think that, I don't know if that would, mean we'll win. Bernie was like a singularly like popular candidate, but I think at least running a credible candidate like that, not as just a protest, but really like trying to get as much of the primary vote as you can, would at least drag the Democrats left and put the issues to our issues on the center of the political discussion in a way that just didn't happen last time around. They can ignore you if they're not worried about looking over their left, and they're just going to keep on trying to be like Ronald Reagan light. So yeah, I think we need to be that, and I think we should start thinking about like who would be a good labor left candidate to challenge. God knows who the Democrats are going to run. Harris maybe.
Yeah. I'm pretty black-pilled about elections and stuff, but I still obviously think that we should do all this stuff. Something you just kind of got me thinking about though is there is kind of like in the kind of political left, there is this question like, what the fuck do we do now that Bernie's gone or whatever? And something I've been thinking about with regards to him, like he's cool. He was a pretty cool person. I think we were all behind him. He's a good speaker. We liked that he said the same things and he was funny and shit. But like a lot of what was good about him wasn't him. It was just that he was a conduit. He was a figurehead for a movement, and that's actually good news if we're sitting around trying to find a new person, because it means it's not 100% the fucking politician.
Mm-hmm.
You need to just find someone who is a good figurehead for the movement that still exists, even though Bernie's gone. Because like
Bernie's still alive.
By the time we release this podcast, who knows what could happen. He's very.
I know what you're saying, but yeah, for sure.
True.
It's funny. It's funny though, because people are like, "Oh yeah, Bernie is so popular and so charismatic." I don't know, like Bernie's like sort of not that charismatic in a certain sense, and it goes to what you're saying, Jake, which is that like actually the reason people liked him wasn't because he was, I don't even know if he's funny. Bernie Sanders funny. I don't know. All of these like weird idiosyncrasies people found charming because he's an authentic person, that's the thing. And so you just need somebody with decent politics who's authentic and not just like talking shit, it's like talking out of their ass because they're another politician. That's all you need. And the specificities of what that person could do matters a lot less than the policies, Bernie could have been a totally different person, and we would have liked whatever like random other idiosyncrasies he had if he had those politics, I think.
For sure.
Cool. I think that's a good note to end on, unless you have any other questions, Jake.
No, this is a really fruitful discussion. Thank you for joining us, Eric. This is really interesting. It's always good to look at the main thing that this is all about, and ask these questions and try to understand. This is it's good. So, with that said, can you please plug, man? Where can people read the book?
Okay. So yes, I'll plug it up. So you can get the book "We Are the Union." You do the full subtitle because, as somebody mentioned, there's a ska band named We Are the Union too. So if you just Google that, they're pretty good, right? I feel like I maybe should do like some cross promotion with them. If you're in LA, maybe they're sort of. I know cool. It's funny, yeah. Various people have noticed me. I was like a ska head from in the Bay Area, so I think it'd be fun. So you can just like look "We Are the Union" with my name, Eric Blanc. You can buy it anywhere, essentially online or in bookstores. So just get a copy. I think you'll like it. The best place to find my writings is on my Substack, which is laborpolitics.com. So you just go laborpolitics.com. You can read what I'm writing, and I'm writing a lot of stuff about Trump and Musk and the federal workers right now. And then just a couple pitches. Like if you're out there and you're like trying to figure out what to do, unionize your workplace, go to EWOC, fill out that form. And then also, this is my last pitch, which is one of the crucial tactics that was really helpful for getting this unionization uptick off the ground, and that is still going to be even more important right now, is salting. That's basically when you get a job in order to unionize it. And Democratic Socialists of America has a really exciting new project to sort of recruit and train and get salts into the biggest campaigns unionization-wise across the country. So there's an easy form you can fill out if you're interested in that. That's you go to bit.ly.saltnow. So it's bit.ly/saltnow. Yeah, become a salt. Like if you, especially if you're not sure what you're doing, maybe you got recently laid off or you just have a shitty job. If you can have a shitty job, you might as well like have a shitty job you can unionize and that can make history at. So that's my pitch to SALT. And then last thing is go to support the federal workers. Like this is the fight right now. Like we can defeat Musk. We have to defeat Musk. It's a winnable struggle. If we're not, we're really screwed. So go to go.savepublicservices.com, get involved. I'll see you out in the streets.
All right. Well, you heard the man, everyone. Salt someone else's workplace. Organize your own workplace. Organize. Get back to being excited about labor. It's 2016 all over again. Trump is president again. We're all 26 again. I don't know what age I was back then. But it is actually very refreshing to talk about labor. I'm glad that we did this because this is the way, right? This is the way forward. Or one of them. I don't know. Hey guys, if you enjoy the show and you would like to support us and all the work we do here, I've organized a union against Anders. Please come to my website. Yeah, no, it's I have demands. No, I'm just kidding.
Surprised I've been salting this entire time.
Oh no, Murray! I knew he was up to something. No, you salted the workplace and then convinced Murray. Okay, whatever. Point is Murray's going down. So anyways, the real point is, if you enjoy the show, please sign up for our Patreon at patreon.com/PodDamnAmerica. It's how we bring the show to you without ads. That's how we get paid to make the show without turning into a stupid thing where we have to offer you shit like BetterHelp, which fucking sucks, and everyone advertises it, and it's fucking evil AI chat GBT therapy bullshit. It's the most evil thing on earth. Read Health Communism. They talk about it. We have a Discord back there. We have a bonus episode every week, and we also have video now. So if you're a video person and you want to support the show, you can watch us. You can watch the regular episodes on YouTube, and you can watch the bonus episodes on our Patreon. And you might see Murray, who I am now very suspicious of. I don't have any shows coming up to promote or anything. I do have one big announcement. My other show, Why You Mad, that has a cult following of very enthusiastic people who I'm sure yell at the podcast when they listen to it. Why You Mad's back. We just did our first episode. It's going to be released to our Patreons who have been with us while we were on break, and then it'll be back, I think, at some point to the public after that. But if you're a Why You Mad head, rejoice. Why You Mad is back. Andrews, you got anything?
At Anders Lee here on social media. Other shows, The Vanquished. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel at Vanquish Podcast. And we were just on an episode of Well, There's Your Problem, which everyone should check out as well. That's it.
Great show. It's busted. It's talking unions.